Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, the Mai Perek Vav, Halacha Daled and Halacha Hey. We will be learning Daf Nun Tes, and we left off on Daf Nun Tes, Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amud. The Gemara is going to begin today by giving us another case where a business venture between a Kohen and a Yisrael is going to be usher because of concerns that are related to Ribbis, as we had in the previous scenario. We're going to see that Kohanim, as Babli Yerushalmi Sanhedrin, Babli Sanhedrin Daf Chavvav Amud Aleph tells us that Kohanim in certain areas were suspect when it comes to the laws of Shemitah. As we'll clarify more details, it's not that they didn't keep Shemitah, but since the Torah calls the produce of Shemitah holy, and they are accustomed to being allowed to eat kachim and truma, even though other Yisraelim may not. So we were choishish in certain cases that they were not careful in the Zman Habir of the Shemitah year. And we will see how that type of suspicion will not be related to the Ribbis problem that we will have, again, in the case that we'll have on top of the Amud. We're going to go from there into Halacha Hey. Halacha Hey is going to speak about the question of whether one is allowed to sell olives that were already harvested for oil production. And they are already in the vat, which is the Seder. You harvest the olives, you put them in a vat, they soak in the vat for a while until they become soft enough for them to be pressed. At a certain point, really we'll speak when we learn the Mishnah inside, subject to a machloikes b'shamai and b'silo, what is that point? But at some point, the liquid that oozes out of the olives is something that the owners want, and therefore they are able to be machshir the olives. Our Mishnah is speaking about a scenario where the olives are not yet muchshir l'kabel tumah, which means that even though it's being handled by someone who might be tamei, who rabbinically for sure is tamei, doesn't yet affect the olives. Now the business is to sell those olives. The question is there a restriction to sell the olives to a person who's not careful in the laws of tumah and tada? Why would there be an issue? I'll tell you very simple. Because when you sell something that at some point in the future will have to be tithed, if it becomes tamei, what's going to happen then to the truma that you separate from it? It will be truma tameya. Truma tameya is something that even though it's not asur b'hana, you have to give it to a kohen. The kohen can use it for fuel, but the kohen cannot eat it. So there is a logic to restrict to whom you can sell produce to prior to it having the Trumas U'Maiser separated from it. Now, we're not speaking about people that were careful not even to be Metamei Chulin. We're not talking, that's a behavior that's beyond the letter of the law. But there is a problem by the letter of the law, you understand, to sell Tevel to a person who is not a Chaver. Question is that you have olives that are in a state that they're not even yet muchshir l'kabel tumah. There may not be such a restriction. Indeed, so is Shitas Beis Hillel. We're going to see Bechlal, not only over here, that Beis Hillel is very hesitant to impose restrictions that will limit business, that will limit the market flow, to whom you could buy, to whom you could sell, including in our Mishnah. There'll be a lot more lenient. The Gemara is going to narrow down the scenario of their leniency. There's going to be a seifa of this Mishnah of Halacha Hey that we're going to have on top of Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis. The Mishnah is going to speak about two people that own grapes. They both place the grapes in a wine press. And now when they have wine, they're dividing the wine. And the Mishnah is going to speak about one of them is Neman to separate Trumas U'Maiser. One of them is not. So the Mishnah says the words that the one who's Neman, Hama Aser, which means the one that is trustworthy to separate Trumas U'Maiser, Ma'aser Eshaloi, will separate all of the Trumas U'Maiser from his half. But the question is there nothing that needs to be done to the other half that's going to the other partner who's not Neman on the Maisers? Is it his problem, or is it the problem of the partner who is Neman because it was all mixed together? The Mishnah says the words that indeed the Ma'aser also has the Bechelkoi B'chol Mokem Shehu, And we'll leave that already for tomorrow and for the next day for the Gemara to unpackage the Sefer of the Mishnah of Halacha. Let's go right inside. Again, we're in Daf Nun Tes, Amid Aleph. We're going to the top of the Amid. Yisrael, Shahaya Moicher Zeisem B'Shishim Loik Tevulim. Before we read the continuation, I think it will be Kedai to read the top Pnei Moshe to give you the background of three issues that this case might touch upon. Says the Pnei Moshe. Yisrael Shahaya Moicher Zeisem. Right, we're speaking about a Yid that's just an example, Simcha, 60 lug of olives. He's selling them when they're still tevel. Now, I know that we learned that generally there's a rule that it's prohibited to sell tevel. We also learned above that there are scenarios where it's permitted. We're not going to repeat that case. We also learned that even though it's something that's asur, sometimes people did it. So whether our scenario is that there is a Yisrael that's selling 60 lug of olives that are tevel, boif and hamuter, there was a tzorech, right? Someone else had tevel that got mixed with truma, if you remember that scenario, or whether he did it beisur. That is the case. That is the case of the Gemara. Now we're learning inside the Pnei Moshe. V'hachi tanin and Hasam is quoting a Tosefta that Yisrael shomaycher and zeisa v'shishim tevalim. He has 60 log of tevel olives, and v'amar loy kohen, a kohen tells him, let me make a deal with you. To name Lee, give them to me. And at some point, he didn't tell him when, I'm going to give you back. But listen to what the Kohen is offering him. The Kohen is offering to give back to him 60 loig of olives that were fully tithed. Understand something? I'm a Yisrael. If I have whatever quantity, in our case, 60 loig of olives, you know how much of it will not end up in my possession? Well, 2% Truma, 10% Ma'aseh Rishon. If it's in the 4 years of the 7 years, which is the first, the second, and the fourth, and the fifth, even though Taka Ma'aseh Sheni does belong to me, but it's Ma'aseh Sheni, I am restricted, I can't eat it here. On top of that, on the third and the sixth year, it's Taka 22% because the other 10% I have to give away to Anani. So I'm giving something to a Kohen, and the Kohen is telling me that he will give me back 60 loig of olives that are Misukan. So let's read inside why this potentially would be problematic. No, the Kohen is telling him, when you're giving me the 60, I'm going to keep it. At least that, I get to choose who to. But from the Yisrael's perspective, he's getting back more. From the Kohen's perspective, he's keeping it. In other words, you can't say that the Kohen, so to say, is paying ribis, because the Kohen is not getting less and giving more, which is the case of ribis. I'm getting $10, I'm giving back $12. He's getting 60. The Kohen will keep the whole 60. The Ein Choishish, number one.
Rabbi, sorry, why is the Kohen doing this?
It doesn't matter why, because he needs it right now.
Got it.
It's very simple. The Kohen wants the 60 loy. From the Kohen's perspective, Kavan, the Kohen knows that he has coming to him, doesn't matter whether it's a week, whether it's a year, he has coming to him 60 loy of olives that are olives that will be Mesukanim. The Kohen is not losing anything. The Yisrael is gaining. But before we get to that, there are three issues. Number one, as we quoted in the Hagdama, if you look inside Bavli, Sanhedrin, Daf Chavvav, you will see over there that Kohanim were suspect in not being careful in Zman Biur Shemitah. Like we explained, in other words, produce of Shemitah may be eaten. You can't hoard it, you can't do schayda with it, but you can take some off the tree and eat it. Ahmed Varam Amurim, when that type is available in the fields for animals, after that time, you have to get rid of what you have in your home. Kohanim were not careful, because since the Torah uses the words Kedusha for the payers of Shvi'is, they felt we have a lot of items that are Kaddish. We can eat kosher. Yisraelim have to be careful in Zman Biur. So you might have thought that since they're not careful in Zman Biur, in Shemitah, if this was olives of the Shemitah year, if you would think maybe you can't make such an exchange with a kohen, we don't have to have such a worry. We do trust kohanim. You can give them 60 olives, 60 loig, one loig. The case was 60 of olives that are tevulim. Now, number two, what's the next chiddush? And that's how it's linked to our topic. We don't say there's an issue of ribis. And Mechalol Kachim is what we kept on referring to last week, that it is Kikoyin Hamisayeyam, the Beis Hagronois, that we're not allowed to exchange something for Truma. We don't say it's considered an exchange. Let's read it inside. And what's the Chiddush Mishum? Because normally in other areas, Shahakoyanim are Chashudim ala Shviz, Kidomrim Peris and Boyded. Komash Molan our Toysefta, Hachen, the Ena Yisrael Choshish, Shema Elu Misukanim, Shenoistam Loy Hakoyim Pedish Shviasay. What will be the Chashash? The Chashash would be that maybe when the coin is promising to replace the 60 with Misukanim, maybe he's going to replace it with Shemitah and he won't let you know. We're not Choshish for that. Number two, no, was At Kedekach, they were not so lenient. The Chashash is that if they had paid a Shvias, even though it was after Zman Bir, they would allow themselves to eat it. But that they're going to give you and they're going to lie to you, no one suspected Kahanim of that. Now, the is in the Pnei Moshe, the Afagav, the Chashak Koynois, Lishishim Loig Misukanim. Tachas Elu Shishim Loig Tevel, Shemekal Menu, one might have argued, Nira Kedibisu, looks like Ribis, because from the Yisrael's perspective, he's getting back 22% more. Shahadei Im Ha Yisrael Hay Besaken Tim Loig. If the Yisrael would do what normally you have to do with your tevel, there would be less. You see, the Pnei Moshe is not going to write how much less. Depends. Like Meiser Sheni, is yours. So you can't always say 22%. But whatever it is, he would end up with less. Now, shishim like shleimim misukanim in exchange b'shvil elu hativalim. So, Taka, why isn't it ribis? Of course, not ribis ktsutza. Why isn't it avak ribis? Why isn't it looks like ribis? Mikol makoyim, the last narrow line in the Pnei Moshe, hoyel ve'ena maviach lehazman b'shvil kach. That's the key. In other words, if the kohen simcha, this is important, would tell the Yisrael, listen, I'm going to give you back misukanim, but since you're getting back from your perspective more than you're giving, you have to wait. Give me 30 days. Because that's the ikir of ribis. The ribis ktsutza, not only is it defined that when you lend money at that time, you make up how much more you're getting in return. The other part of ribis ktsutza is that the person is getting paid for waiting. The monetizing the wait. So whenever you don't verbalize a time of repayment, that in itself already removes it from ribis. First middle-sized lines. In other words, the kohen is not telling, listen, I'm going to give you back Mr. Kohen, but you're going to give me 6 months for that, or even 1 day for that. He didn't mention time. You give me this, and I'll give you back. So therefore, since no one mentioned a wait of time, which is the real problem of it. Number one. Number two, at the end of the day, it's a great case. The guy is getting back more. Well, from whose perspective? From whose perspective? It's number one, they never mentioned to wait time. Vigam, you need both things together. The kohen is not actually giving back more from the kohen's perspective, because when the kohen gets tevel, the kohen will be mafresh or trumas or meises, and the kohen will keep it. Because he gets to keep it. So now I have a question. I'm curious. Would we say the same thing on the 3rd and the 6th year? No,
even not. What about Meiser?
Sheni, you can still say shaloi. Doesn't bother me that much. But when it comes to separate Meiser Sheni, the Machal al Mois, you can take it. Everyone goes to Yerushalmi. Meiseroni is already different. Maybe not, because you need to have both reasons. But from the Yisrael's perspective, he's getting back more. But from the Kohen's perspective, he's not giving more. Because what he's getting, he'll keep, because he gets to keep the mices.
Unless he's a Kohen Ani.
Unless he's a Kohen Ani. And and what will be the third chiddush? That what? The name of one should not say that what? That the Zeu Kohen HaMisayeh Bebeis Hagronos She'itn Loi HaMaiseh. That's a problem. Then, yeah, V'zenikra Machal Kachin. Okay, and this painting, no daf nun vav. Here it's not the case over here because the kamli have a kohen misayeh. Because she'ena kim avater kohen laHisrael mishaloi klum. Kohen misayeh is the kohen is giving something more. He's giving work to get truma. His kohen is not giving anything. Since the kohen again. From the Kohen's perspective, it's a pure, it's a wash. So it's not a problem. Now we can read it inside. It's Gavaldik Chiddush.
But what would motivate the Kohen to do this?
The Kohen needs it right now. The Kohen needs olives because he's having a fabrengen, and with the mashke, those olives, and the hottest, and he knows he's getting olives. He says, give this to me and I'll give you back when I get mine. Same reason why people borrow money, if they plan to pay back. If they don't plan to pay back, they borrow money, they get money. If they plan to pay back, if you can pay back, so why do you have to borrow money yet? Because I had the money that I have to pay back, I don't have in my pocket yet. The cash flow, it's an olive flow. All right, inside. Yisrael, guys, Nachal, top it up. Yisrael, Shoya, Moicher, Zeis, and B'shishim, like Tevul. No, the Yisrael is planning to sell it. And Amaloi comes to Kohen and he tells the Yisrael, listen, here's the chayk. Today, you give them to me. That will be already fully misukanim. I'm going to give you back 60 lug of tithe olives. So the chiddush is, like we read in the Pnei Moshe, 3 chiddushim, not the issue of shmita, not an issue of ribis, not an issue of kekoyin amisayeya muter. However, if shishim like tevulim, if the kohen tells him that you're giving me 60 loig right now, and I'm going to give you back 60 loig the way you gave it to me. I'm going to give you, what I'm going to get later, 60 loig of olives that are still tevel. But va'ani ba'at cholken esamaisris. You understand? Then it's also Gavaldik. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. Shishim like Tevulim, Aval, right? The last 2 medium-sized lines. Aval amamali ani etin lachatachtem. I'm not going to give you back Mesukanim. I'm going to give you back like Tuvei lamachedem. But then va'ani va'ato yiu cholken asamaistres shenesakin le'elu hativalim sholcha. You're going to give me. I'm going to give you back, and from what I give you back, half will be mine, half will be yours. Of the mices. I just wanted something clear that when yeah. Now, why would the Yisrael do it? Because he's getting half of the mices. Half of the mices would mean, just to make it clear, you separate the truma from mices. Let's say that just we got the truma. Separate the truma. You give the truma to the kohen. When the kohen gives you half of it, it belongs to the Yisrael. He cannot eat it, but he can sell it.
He's not giving him the teras, no, he's giving him that.
He's giving him half of the mices. It's also.
All right, why don't we say what the Kohen is doing is
One
encouraging...
second, let's just read inside. Let's read inside.
Sorry.
Once all your thought. The Gemara understands. Kedu yavle kulei chmashtenish. In the first case of the Braisa, emuter. Kedu yavle palge is asur. Look inside the first widest line in the Maraf in the Pnei Moshe. But tamashas, chmashtenish. Kedu, kedei, kedi yavle kulei muter. Kedi, behold, yavle palge asur. Da bereisha at the end, mekabel Yisrael shisha misukanim kula. Chmashtenish. In the Reisha, Yisrael ends up getting back complete. I know he's not getting Truma, but he's ending up with pure 22% more. It's good. The Khan ain't like him chatzia meiser shu shaloi. That's why the Pnei Moshe wants to emphasize is that the Kohen wants a toiva, right? So what is the Kohen giving back? He's telling him that when you're going to be ma'aser, I'm going to give you back half. But it's mamash his, meaning that Yehu shaloi lemachroi. The Kohen is, I'm going to give you later. Well, that's a ribis issue. Doesn't make sense. He's getting back even less. Keep your finger in the Pnei Moshe. Answers the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Of course. Khan must be b'marviach loi. B'marviach loi means that the Yisrael is lechatchila agreeing because the Kohen is telling him, I need a certain amount of time until I pay you back, which is what people do when they get a loan. Give me now. I'm going to give you back. I'm going to give you half of the mices, but you have to give me whatever that time is. Whenever you mention, I need for you to wait a certain minimum amount of time before I pay you back, then any type of addition that you'll get at the end will be machzekiribs. And look inside the Pnei Moshe, right? This at the end of the second widest line from the Amar Rabbi Yossi Khan, it must be the marviach lo seifa ma'idem that marviach lo isman befeidush. Which means, the Kohen tells the Yisrael, listen, I need olives now. What's man? Even if it's a day, it doesn't matter how long. He's saying clearly that I need time. I'm going to give you back. First of all, I'm going to give you back what you're giving me. Even in this case. Then I'll give you chatzi chelik ha'maaseh. In other words, whenever there is a verbalization of weight by any type of loan, and the end of the story will be that the lender will end up with more than what he gave, you have an issue of mechsekeribis. And indeed, the Tani came, let's just finish it inside. So we learned explicitly in Abraisa that we're talking about the case of the Reisha. It doesn't matter. It's just a nuance. You give me back, you give me Tvalim. The Kohen says, I'll give you back Misukanim. But I need time. Whatever it is, then it's awesome. Why? Because of Ribis and because of Bizoyan Kachim. What's the Bizoyan Kachim? Look inside the last, over here, read the last line of Pnei Moshe before the Mishnah. The Ma Shemoichol Echatzi Amaisir. Why is the Kohen agreeing to give him, even in the case of the Sefer, that he's only giving him half of the Maisir? Because he's getting something. What is he getting? He's getting the olives now. He's saying clearly, I need it now, and I'm only going to pay you back later. So in exchange of getting something now that he doesn't have, and the other one agreeing, the Yisrael agreeing to wait, in exchange, he's giving truma. Any truma that's in exchange is also the Mashu Meichel Lechatzi Meiser. Have a kick on a Messiah. Kadei Sheet Lechatzi Meiser or Acher Belusul. So Givaldik. Okay.
All right. In the first case,
yes.
Why don't we say the fact that it's tevel and he's getting it, it's going to encourage others to do the same thing over and over again. The fact that it's mutar for the Israel to sell the tevel, it's going to encourage others to do the same thing. Why is that not a question?
So I'll just repeat what I said before. First of all, everyone knows that it's usher to sell tevel. And we did learn one case before. We learned a case before where it's l'tzoyrech. L'tzoyrech that we learned before is that if you have a person that had truma that got mixed in chulin, you cannot separate.
Right.
Remember, even let's say I had 10 pounds of tevel. 10 pounds of tevel. Into it fell 2 pounds of truma. And it got mixed up. I cannot say, well, I'm going to separate 2% of the 10 pounds. And I'm good. You can't do that because could be what you removed was already the truma. So the only solution is I'm going to need new tevel, 10 pounds, to be mafresh from that tevel without mixture, not only for it, but also for the mixture. In that case, if I don't have tevel, you can send it to me tevel.
Right.
So you're asking why aren't we choshesh? Because everyone knows you can't sell tevel. All right. Okay. Moving on. Here again, before we learn the Mishnah, just to get a quick background of the laws of olives, that after olives are harvested, even if during the harvest some oil oozes out of the olives, since it's shaloi b'ritzayin haba olim, that means that the owners of the olives don't want to lose that oil. That oil is not considered chashuv, and therefore, even though oil is one of the 7 liquids that make foods susceptible to becoming tamei, not that oil. So we're never concerned, just to know, when olives are harvested off the tree, when it's mechuber, it's not tamei, not shayach. Even when it's off the tree, unless it became wet with the tzayin habalam, which is normally not the case, it's not shayach for it to becoming tamei. So even if the owner, the handler, maybe a buyer, they're not chavedim, it's not tamei. I want to give one more introduction that's not even in the Pnei Moshe, just the words. I know that sometimes we use the word chaved in a more generic way, but here in the Mai, we have 2 words that mean different things. There is a neman and there's a chaved. Separate things. Neman is a person who is trustworthy that he or she will separate all of the trumas u'maises. When I buy produce from a neman, there is no halacha of the Mai. Neman. Even people that are neman were not always trustworthy, that they're going to be meticulous in the laws of Tumah and Tara. Becoming meticulous in the laws of Tumah and Tara qualifies you to be called a chav. Just to make it very clear. Our Mishnah is not speaking about a person who's not a neman. Our Mishnah is addressing someone who's a neman, which is important, but is not a chav. The question is, if I have tevel, I'll tell you better, I don't even have tevel yet. If I have an item that doesn't yet have to be tied, because there wasn't yet the Gemara Malach, like if I harvested olives to make it into olive oil, when does the chiyuv of tithing kick in? When it's oil. Not even now. So there's no issue now. I can sell it. I'm not selling tevel cake. But if I'm going to sell it to a person who's not a chaver, at some point, when it will have the Gemara Malach, it's going to have to be tied. That person will separate the truma, being that he is tamei. If this is an item that we know is mukshal lekabel tuma, not the case of grain, there's no reason to be chayish that grain, the meiruach, will not become wet. Why would it be wet? What we'll speak about the olives, there could be an issue of what? I should not be allowed to sell it to a non-chaver because I'm guaranteeing that the truma will be truma to me. Now, yes, when olives were taken off the tree, there's no issue. Even if there's oil on it. When olives, after it was harvested and gathered, it was put into a ma'aton, that's memes nun. A ma'aton is a vat, and it was left to soak there for it to become soft. There was a machlokes b'shamai and b'silol, not related to our Mishnah, related but not related. At what point in the ma'aton does it become muksher? According to b'shamai, is more machmir. B'shamai holds that once you put the olives in the vat, if oil naturally oozes out, the owners are happy that there's oil in there because you leave it there until it gets soft enough to put it into the press. But when you put it into the press, you pour the whole vat into the press. So nothing is lost by the oil oozing out. When oil oozes out and the olives are soaking in the oil, it helps it become soft. So Beis Shammai holds from that moment, it's already moksha. Beis Hillel is more lenient, meaning Beis Hillel says, then not right away, not right away. Only after the olives are so soft, these are his words, that 3 olives like adhere to each other, it's so gooey that 3 stick to each other. From that point on, it's muksha lekabel tuma, which means libei silo, prior to that, it's not shaykh to be tam. Our Mishnah is going to be speaking about that window, libei silo, even though there's a machlekes b'sham and b'silo. But we're speaking about a time where the olives, even though they are already in the ma'aton, but they're not yet shaykh, they're not even susceptible to becoming tamei. So they're not tamei. If I sell it to a person who's not a chaver, at that moment, he won't make a tamei either. Why should I or should I not be allowed to sell it? Because that person, if he is not a chaver, at some point, it's going to become mukhshal lekabel tuma. If he's not a chaver, he'll make a tamei, becomes mukhshal, he'll touch it, he'll make a tamei. And then whenever you'll separate the truma so meiser, you got truma tamei. That's the case of the Mishnah. Let's quickly read inside the Pnei Moshe. I mean, I don't mind reading. Let's read the Pnei Moshe because he gives all that. So what are we talking about? Says the Pnei Moshe. We're speaking about olives that were already detached, but they are still in the phase where mighty. For example, okay, they did not ooze out. That's Rabbi Shammai, because Rabbi Shammai, if it began to ooze out, it's already moksha. So it didn't even shvitz yet. What's the maton? Who are kli? Shenois l'may hazeisim sheyischamamu in order v'yiru'uyim lo haitzi shemen. Period. What does maton come from? Pasuk and Iyov u'miloshon atinav melo'oi chalavu. Okay. Now v'hachisiru Rabbi Shammai b'reish perik test the taros the oz when they begin schwitzing in the maton hukshru lekabel tuma. And just to know, for the record, Rabbi Silol Savri, no, not yet. Even if there is some zeya coming out, still only mishiyaschabru shloisha zelozeh kishehem shoyim b'maton. They have to linger a little bit longer until what point? Until they begin adhering to each other, not 1, 3. Now, somebody be Shammai hachem that even though it's not yet mukhshar, so it's not yet tummy. Shelo yimkerein elo lechavar hamuchzek betara v'lo yimkerein l'she'ena chaver. Why? Because most people buy these olives to make them into olive oil. Are you kidding me? They are already in the maton. So what's going to happen? You, the non-chaver, you'll trample on it and you'll make it tummy. Shelo yidrachaysim betumah. Ubeisilo loimrim no afle maisen. These are the words of Beisilo. I know I'm reading everything straight in the Pnei Moshe. That's the girsa. Okay, and our inside they have different girsois. Aflemi shalakibel elol aser peroisa. That he's making it very clear that I'm not allowed to sell produce to an einon nemon. No one says you could. So he wants to make it clear. No. The guy that we're talking about is a person that is nemon, but he's not a chaver. Elol aser peroisa. To him it could be sold. Why? For sure it's going to become Tomei. So says the Pnei Moshe explaining Beisilo, since it's not yet Mukhshar, Eimar, I'm allowed to say, I'm the seller. Who told you that this guy will do what most people do, which is he's buying the olives in the maton to make them into olive oil? After he wants to eat them. Some people ate them from the maton. Eimar yoichlem koydem sheyaziu v'yuchshuru. Ukadama bigamara the beila called the matzina limitla to linen. When you have an excuse means we know that the probability is that most people did it to trample, to make them into oil. We're not denying that. As long as there's a possibility, we're going to limit it more in the Gemara. But there has to, because Beisila l'shitosei b'chlal holds when it comes to business, we do everything we could not to put restrictions on business. That will be a big restriction. You can't sell it to this one. You can't sell it to that one. You already cannot sell it to the Ein Nemon. It's hard to do. It's hard to make a living. If there's an excuse, you can rely on the excuse. Okay.
What's the name on Amaretz?
The word Am Ha'aretz is used when a person is nish nemon and not a chaver.
Right. I'm saying it's not a mechira here of chaver. I don't. What's the difference? Why did Gemara choose to say selling to Naaman if I don't see a difference between this and Amar?
Like this, if I have produce that did not yet reach the phase of Mises, just learned it's not that long ago in the Rambam. First of all, you can argue that the mechira itself is an important step, right? It's one of the 6 dinim, midrabanan. So, but let's go. I cannot sell produce to a person who's not Neman al Mises. Why? Because the rule is, that's what we spoke of before in the Masechta. By kashrus, generally, the onus, the responsibility is on the buyer. I know that midrabanan you're not allowed to sell treif. I know that. I'm speaking about that in the exceptions. There are exceptions. Person shechted an animal, he's in the business of selling kosher, but the animal is treif. He's going to sell it to a goy. That's what they do today. They give it to the goyish line production. It's not his achrayis. The achrayis is I'm the consumer. I have to make sure what I buy is kosher. We don't do that when it comes to Trumas U'Maisos for some reason. The onus is on the seller. You cannot sell something that's not Mesukah. Now, hold on. Here, we're speaking about selling it in an earlier phase where you are allowed to sell it as long as you know the buyer will be ma'asin it. So there's an issur to sell produce at any earlier phase to a person who's not them. That's why the Pnei Moshe says, don't take me there. We're speaking about the guys in Emma. The only issue of our Mishnah is Tumentat. Okay.
That's another question. Why do we assume automatically that he will mitabe product?
A person who's not Neman, let me see, didn't do the Kabbalah. No. Neman for Tumas Umaisris.
Okay.
Is not Neman for Tumantara. A person who didn't make that Kabbalah, in front of three Chaverim is Midrabanan already Tamei. And it's a unique Rabbanan, and it could be Tzlamei D'Oraisa. He's not Neman. He's not Neman for Tumantara. I have to be careful with him. He's not a Chav. Amaretz is a guy, not Trumas Umaisris, not Tumantara. From there, a guy makes a Kabbalah, and from his Kabbalah, he makes a pledge in public. It's called a Hachlata. The Mishnah calls it a Kabbalah. That's why the Litvish, they call Hachlatas Kabbalah. And then a Kabbalah, that's the word of the Mishnah. And he becomes a Neman. Then he makes another Kabbalah. And now he's a Chaver. And if he only made the Kabbalah for Trumas Umaisris and not for Tumantara, he's called a Neman, but not a Chaver. That's what we're talking about. So I can sell it to him mitzad the issue of he's never. He's going to tell. But the problem is he might make a tummy. Let's read the Mishnah inside. However, I know there's different girsais. We're going to follow the girs of the Pnei Moshe. Af l'maiser. I know it doesn't normally fit, but af l'maiser. Okay. Af l'maiser means you can sell it to a person as long as we know that he's separating the might. All I care is about that. I don't care about that he's not yet careful in Tumentat. Now, normally by Machlokes B'Shamim and B'Silul, there's a big rule. The Gemara is going to speak about it later. You know, B'Shamim and B'Silul ain't a Mishnah. Very rare, we allow and we praise people from Beis Shammai who followed Beis Hillel. I want to give you one big klal, and we'll speak about it more when we learn this in the Gemara. That doing something against Beis Hillel, even if you're Mahmed, is prohibited. But here we're speaking about someone who won't sell. No, it's if you're going to follow Beis Shammai, you're not doing anything. You're not selling. So there we say, Utsunua Beis Hillel. Tsunua, I know, means modest. It means kosher. It means chassid, people that go beyond the letter of the law. In this case, they allow themselves to be noyhagin kediv Beis Shammai. No, you're following Beis Shammai passively, and yeah, every case is a case. We're going to the Daf Nun Tesama base before we go to the Sefer, but understand something that we'll see in the Gemara right away. Even Beis Hillel is not so simple. Beis Hillel is really speaking about a very limited scenario. There is a certain point. I know the Gemara doesn't define things with quantities, but we'll get a concept that even Beis Hillel will say you can't do it. Because there's a certain point where a guy buys a big vat. He's not going to eat the olives in the vat. He's buying it to make olive oil. At that point, Beis Hillel will also be moed to Beis Shammai. It's going to be it's in a very narrow area that there has to be a possibility, small possibility, that the guy that bought it will eat it from the matan. So the Tzroa Beis Hillel says, I don't know what is a little, what is a lot. And the guy is saying, it's Beis Hillel is being very lenient, and they allowed people and they advocated for the Tzunuim to follow Beis Shammai. The case of the Sefer, we're going to read on that Nun Testament base. We're going to unpackage this only when we learn the Gemara because there's so many to talk about. Well, let's get the case. The case is, like I said in the intro, you have two people. Each one has a vineyard. Everyone is coming with grapes now. Let's say they came with the same amount. Doesn't make a difference. Let's say it's 50-50. Everyone came with 10 pounds. And they hired a wine press, zusammen. So they put the grapes in together. We're not speaking about Tum and Tara now. Now we're speaking about the issue of Mises. And whatever the end wine result is, if each one came with 10 pounds, they're going to divide it in half. If it was 60-40, 60-40. Two people partnered, their wine is mixed. When they have the wine ready, they're separating it. Problem is, Reuven and Shimon, Reuven knows I'm Neman. Shimon is not Neman. Now, if we were to say Breira, that I'm getting what I gave, it's not my problem, it's his problem. But we cannot afford to say that. Let's read it inside. In other words, just I know the general rule is that we paskin actually that we don't say Breira by Isur D'Oraisa. We say Breira by Isur D'Rabbanan. Let's wait until we learn the Gemara inside. Just get the case. I want to get the words. The case is we got Shnayim Shabbatzu Karmei. Now Reuven and Shimon, two people, each one has their own vineyard. So the grapes belonged each one separately. They became partners because they mixed it in the wine. They put it in one gas. They put it in one wine press. And now, when they have the wine, each one, and what's the issue? Explains the Mishnah that echad ma'aser oitzli, the echad she'ena ma'aser. One of them is not neman. That's the problem. So listen, if I'm getting mine and he's getting his, that's his problem. But if he's getting some of mine, then I have an achrayis. And indeed, yes, I do. Says the Mishnah, hama'aser ma'aser shaloi. From what I got to separate from Isis. But now, in addition, and in addition, where my chelik might be, it might be there. There's something I have to do. We'll see in the Gemara. It means you have to separate the mai from your chelik for the other chelik. Let's leave this for when we get to the Gemara. Okay, guys, we're going to focus today on the case of the Reisha. Like we mentioned, we're going to really limit it. We read all this in the Pnei Moshe. Because since derech b'nei adam loichal zeseim atumin, people eat olives in the vat. The mele, we can say, who cares if this guy will make a tummy? He'll never make a tummy. He's going to eat it up before it's moksha. What are you talking about? Chein derech b'nei adam. What people when they buy a vat of olives, yeah, they eat that. That's what they do it for. No. Clara answers the Gemara. It means ela alidei ila. That's what the words of Pnei Moshe. Ila means an excuse, a teretz. We're looking for a pretext. Now, there is a limit in the excuse. In Brazil, there was a guy, they caught him with a politician with all these billions of dollars. They asked him, how did you get all this money? He says, I won the lottery. So they told him that there isn't a single lottery that has all that. He says he won the lottery many times. You understand? So there's a limit. Once you come in the lottery, the guy, I won it 15 times, that's why I get the money. That's what the Gemara is going to say. And first of all, says the Gemara of Amant Beis Hillel, Kedatin, Beis Hillel follows Lishito Sayo, that's Kedatin in the Yerushalmi de Tanina. We learned recording a Mishnah in Shviz. If a person is a suspect, not to keep Shemitah, Kipshuta. In other words, this is a guy that's going to work his land on Shemitah. I have a cow. I know cows can be eaten. Yeah, but cows that could be eaten have one price. And remember, that's the whole sugya in Bava Metzia. And then animals that are the rodeo, that's the word in the Gemara, Leridia. So can I sell this guy a cow that is made for plowing? The buyer I know is suspect to use animals to plow. So you can't. Because let's go with that. Or you can use the words misayeh. Why? Because you can eat it. And then look at the words of Beis Hillel. And v'orchei de barnash, or maybe the Gemara is asking, v'orchei de barnash, is it normal that a person will mikois means he's going to eat? Tchoida de ridya is a lot more expensive. People don't buy a cow that can be used for plowing. First of all, it's more expensive. Also, I know this from this, that when cows that are plowers, they're muscular. They're not even good for eating. People don't eat them. So enochanami. So right away the Gemara clarifies, it's not that it's a high chance, but it's possible. That's called the il. It's an excuse. But when we give an excuse, says the Gemara, it has to be. So how does the Gemara say that? That you should know like this. That this abrais, that shavim, that both the shavim means Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are on the same page because Beis Hillel will be moided to Beis Shammai. That if let's go to a case of grain, that if a person is selling a very small quantity of grain, that's what the Marafulda says, a very small amount of grain. Here again, when could it become a muksher? When you make it into a dough. Prior to you making it into a dough, it's not muksher. Some people take the kernels and they toast it and they eat the kernels without making it into a dough. Small amount of people. There we find in a brisa that if it's a very small amount, even Beishama is that you can sell it to a guy that's not a chav. And furthermore, Tani, we learned in another brisa that Shavin, that Beishama is an agreement. This is the key. That if you have a whole stack, which is a large quantity, I don't know how you define large. If it's a large quantity, Beis Hillel will also say you cannot sell it to a non-chaver. The guy might eat toasted kernels. Come on, that amount you'll make into bread. You'll make it into a dough, and you're going to make it into an challah will be tamei. Or ve'evet shalanavim, a vat of grapes, and clearly ma'apan shal zeisam, a vat of olives. If it's a large amount, however you define large, even Beis Hillel is moed el lochav. Or ulemi shu yedei shu oisa betara. I just want to know about that other cases. Ulemi shu yedei shu oisa betara. You know what some people did? Some people were not chavedim, but they, for their business, we trusted them because they made money. They would hire chavedim to be the kneaders. So if you know it's not going to be, all of that is, we're going to stop over here, is showing you that this limits the understanding of Beis Hillel in the Mishnah. When does Beis Hillel in the Mishnah say that you are allowed to sell it to a non-chaved if it's a small amount of olives in a vat? However you define small. And even there, it's an elah. But at least it's a small amount. Once it's a large amount, everyone buys it for olive oil. Even Beis Hillel will hold like Beis Shammai that you cannot sell it only to a chaver.